You're listening to The Switch, a nonprofit HR podcast about all things talent management for social impact organizations. This episode is part of a special series with Lisa Brown Alexander, founder and CEO for Nonprofit HR. This special series focuses on all things organizational culture. Never miss an episode of The Switch. Visit us online at nonprofithr.com/The Switch. For this episode, Lisa will interview Jonna Davis, Operations and Impact Director for the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, or FFAR. And now for some information about our conversation host. Driven to serve the often overlooked people management needs for the social impact sector, Lisa Brown Alexander set out to build a market where one didn't exist. She founded Nonprofit HR in 2000, the leading talent management firm in the country that works exclusively with the nonprofit sector. A serial entrepreneur, Lisa is also co-founder of Wellspring Manor and Spa, located in Prince George's County, Maryland. Lisa's goal is to ensure that every nonprofit HR engagement inspires social sector leaders to strengthen their most important asset, their people. Over the course of her career, Lisa has presented to hundreds of organizations, staff, and leadership teams, covering all things talent management for the social sector. Nonprofit HR has also been listed by Inc. 5000 as one of the nation's fastest growing companies. And now for some background information on our guests. Jonna Davis joined the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research in November 2021 as the Operations and Impact Director, responsible for enhancing operations and assessing the impact of FFAR's research funding. After spending over a decade in global development, she joined FFAR with the desire to apply her experience in impactful work in the United States. She's especially interested in the intersection of agriculture and climate change. Davis previously served on the leadership team at Busara Center for Behavioral Economics at Nairobi-based research and advisory organization, using behavioral science to strengthen global development programs. She first served as the Director of Operations, launching offices in Lagos, Kampala, Delhi, and Dar es Salaam. She then became the Director of Strategy, working closely with Busara's Chief Executive Officer to develop, track, and communicate the organization's 3-year strategy. And now, here's Lisa and Jonna.
Good morning, Jonna. Thank you again so much for joining us this morning. We're looking forward to engaging in a meaningful conversation this morning about talent. But before we do that, take a moment to share with us a little about the mission of FFAR and its purpose in the community.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. So happy to tell you a little bit about FFAR. So basically, FFAR builds public-private partnerships to support research in food and agriculture. So we co-create our science with the agricultural community. We're trying to fill critical gaps, and we also invest in the scientific workforce. We were designed to complement USDA's agenda, but to also take an additional step by basically bringing in other stakeholders who can co-fund the research. So every dollar that we grant out in research, we get the same amount of dollars from other stakeholders. So we're basically doubling the impact or more of the dollars that we receive from Congress. So our vision is to support pioneering science to provide everyone with access to affordable, nutritious food grown on thriving farms. And we're doing that by investing in science and the scientific workforce. We fund in 6 challenge areas, and we have a team that covers that research in each of those specific areas.
Excellent. Such meaningful work, especially in today's times. Let's talk about your team and the role of talent in accomplishing the mission. If you could summarize that, what's the integration between FFAR's mission and the talent that it brings into the organization?
Well, first of all, in order to stay on the cutting edge of science and to make sure that we're addressing the challenges of food and agriculture for years to come, we need to make sure that we have top talent on our team. In terms of what the role of talent is, we're competing for talent with companies, we're competing for talent with the government, we're competing for talent with many other organizations, including other grant makers. So we want to make sure that we're attracting and retaining and developing the best talent so that we can continue to stay on the cutting edge of what we're doing. I think in my perspective, having a robust talent strategy that really focuses on those 3 aspects, attracting, retaining, and developing, is incredibly important because we want our staff, to stay. We want our staff to be happy, and we want to continue to do what we do very, very well and at the top of our game.
Excellent. So refreshing to hear so many organizations are on a talent journey, and particularly as we emerge from this post-COVID era that we find ourselves in. Tell me how your talent management practices have been impacted by the pandemic.
FFAR, obviously, like many organizations, had to step away from the office. I know that staff spent many, many months working from home, working from remote locations. At some point, I think in 2021, FFAR really put the question to our staff, like, do we want to continue this, or do we want to go back to the office? And staff really, I think, resoundingly responded that they wanted to keep the option of remote work there. In terms of what we did, we had 2 floors of our office in DC, but we reduced it to 1 floor. And so now staff have the option, if they happen to be in DC, some of our staff are based there, some of our staff are based elsewhere, they have the option of coming to the office, but we have the option of remote work indefinitely, which has been really great. So I think in terms of talent management and talent practices, I mean, that's definitely changed how the organization is run, right? We've had to adapt to spending time together virtually, to communicating virtually, working around all of those moments when, you might have just popped into somebody's office and information was just easily flowing. And how can you be more intentional about that? How can you make sure that communication is clear? But I think in terms of even attracting talent, I think that we've seen that the remote work option is a really, really big plus. I know that not every employer has gone with that option, but I think it's really, really attractive to people who might want to work for us, especially since at FFAR, work-life balance is something that's really, really important to us. We get to live that value, and we also get to show people that might be interested in working with us that is really important to us. And that's one way that we live that value. So I think the pandemic changed a lot of things for us, right? So we expanded the pool of who might be able to work with us. And so that's also really great as well.
Absolutely. It sounds like FFAR has really embraced a hybrid work model. You've got a physical space where people can come to connect, to collaborate, but you're also recognizing the power of a distributed workforce and the opportunity that it afforded you to maybe bring people into the organization from places and spaces you didn't normally recruit from. So that's wonderful. How has that hybrid environment impacted the culture? What did FFAR do through that season of kind of uncertainty about the physical space? What did you do to keep folks together?
It wasn't always perfect, right? I think we had to learn from each other. We had to learn from our mistakes. But I think one thing that I saw was making sure that at least a few times a year, or at least once a year to start, we're getting everybody together. Once it was safe to get back together in person last year, we had an all-staff meeting last June. We'll be doing the same thing this June, and just making sure that we at least give people the chance to meet in person, because a lot of times those in-person connections, they can carry over throughout the course of a year, just because, I had a chat with so-and-so, we really created a bond. And now I feel much more comfortable kind of like sending them a Teams message, or just randomly even calling them if I need something. So I think that has been important. I know that FFAR was much more intentional about using the kind of the remote work tools that we had, Microsoft Teams. I think that just became really, really important. This sounds a little too structured, but it really helped us to kind of clarify what are expectations around communications and how do we communicate with each other.
Let's shift gears though and talk a little bit about compensation. You're now more distributed workforce, how you layered compensation onto that, and what you did to kind of encourage better transparency. We know that that's increasingly important to the workforce, to people who are looking at employers to potentially connect themselves to. What did FFAR do in the compensation transparency space?
Yeah, and I think a lot of this was pre-pandemic or around the time that the pandemic started. So this was before we had an entirely distributed workforce. One thing that's been really important to FFAR is to have really clear compensation bands for each of our roles, so that everybody knows kind of that when, they get promoted into a new job, they know what the range is. When someone is applying to a job at FFAR, they know what the range is. We work every year with a compensation consultant who kind of looks at the market, who tries to help understand our job descriptions across the organization to make sure that we are being competitive, right? And that we are structuring our salary bands so that we're actually able to attract and retain the type of talent that we want, and that we remain competitive. We have a, fully transparent salary scale for each of our roles. And of course, when we post roles, roles publicly, for someone to apply. We also post the range. And I can say, like, as a candidate who applied about 2 years ago, it was really, really important to me. I think, when I was looking at roles, it was just really, really reassuring to know, like, hey, okay, this one is in my range. I know when I'm applying, I'm not wasting my time or their time. And I know that, at least when it comes down to discussing salary, we're starting from at least a shared understanding of what that is. So that was really important to me. I know that's important to other candidates. And I think that's just becoming, just increasingly important in the market. And I think especially younger applicants, I think, like, we talk about Gen Z, who are really, really expecting that from their employers. And I think, like, I'm on board with that. And I think we want to be able to do that. We try to be really transparent about what translates into a raise every year. So everybody starts with the same cost of living adjustment. In this year, for example, inflation was really high. And so we know that, that's really important to, we don't want staff to kind of lose the value of their salaries just because inflation happens in a year. So everybody starts with the same inflation-based and, like, cost of living based increase. And then on top of that, we're very, very clear about what performance ratings translate into what percentage of raise on top of that. We're really trying to really be clear with our expectations, with our policies, so that staff know what to expect every year.
What have been some of the challenges of conducting performance reviews and assessing performance in a virtual environment? Can you share maybe some of the challenges that your organizations face?
From what I've seen, I think the challenges are almost the same. I think it's always hard to give people feedback, right? And I think we always want to make sure that people get comfortable with that. So I think the challenges that we would face as an organization, I don't imagine that they're very different from others. We've just tried to push, and we're still doing this. We're trying to push on kind of like just giving people really clear guidance about how do you give good feedback? What are the expectations? Like, if you're meeting expectations in terms of your performance review, that's good. And that's not a bad grade. If you're just meeting expectations, you don't always have to be exceeding. You don't have to be wildly exceeding. We are happy when you're meeting expectations, and to just align people to that, both managers and their direct reports. We just want to make sure that we're always giving managers and employees the tools to have those conversations. And that's something that we're building, even continuing to build with the nonprofit HR team. So this year we're working on developing manager guidance that's even clearer, so that people just have a reference point to refer back to, so that they don't, they feel comfortable having those conversations. Looking to integrate talent into your mission strategic plan? During annual strategic planning, organizations often overlook what talent is needed to meet their goals. Partner with Nonprofit HR for your organization's talent management needs. We offer HR outsourcing and project-based consulting, including strategy and advisory, retained search, total rewards, and equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice. We also offer customized trainings for your workforce. Join the many social impact organizations that have trusted Nonprofit HR to help them increase mission impact through their people. Visit nonprofithr.com.
Let's talk a little bit about equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice. Obviously, many organizations began to reflect on their own internal practices after the murder of George Floyd. Can you tell us a little about FFAR's journey in this space, and if it preceded that kind of pivotal moment in American history, or if it began as a result or following that? I think there have been many people at FFAR who have been kind of, really focusing on this for many years, who have been voicing that FFAR needs to, to take this very, very seriously. In terms of what FFAR has done, it's not easy. Again, this was before my time, so I can't totally speak to everything that happened at FFAR. We basically formed a working group of staff, so that staff could kind of participate in identifying what are the challenges, what do we need to be addressing, and what do we need to be doing to address the challenges that FFAR is having. And I think, the working group did a tremendous amount of work. Now I'm kind of speaking for myself, but I think one of the things that seems so mundane, but is really, really important for just equity at an organization, is having really clear policies and processes. We are a fairly young organization. We were only established a few years ago. So there were a lot of things that weren't formalized at the organization beforehand. That means, when you're running in the early years, when you're running a bit more like a startup, maybe one person gets treated differently from another because you don't remember what the policy was. But those are gaps. There's no policy at all, right? Exactly. You don't remember what you agreed last time, right? And so
I'm speaking again, comparing ourselves to the very early years of FAR, but one thing that has just been really important to us has just been to like standardize things, right? So that we know exactly what should happen in every case and that we're able to treat employees equitably under those policies and under those processes. And so I think that's been really, really important. What we try to do this year in terms of our efforts, I personally felt that putting a lot of work on a working group of people who already have their own full-time jobs can be challenging, right? So people might have a passion, but they also, they have to answer to that performance review as well. So as passionate as they might be about diversity and equity, inclusion and justice, how do they fit that into their day jobs? We basically brought in an external consultant who can really, be guided by the head of the working group, but report straight up to the executive director, so that we're not just kind of talking about this as a group activity that we're doing. We're basically saying this is an organizational priority from the very, very, very top, and we're going to hold ourselves accountable, from the very, very top. It's still a work in progress. I think it's hard to have some of those conversations, and I think it's hard for people to, sometimes recognize unconscious bias. We've had all those trainings, but I think it's an ongoing conversation, and I think my goal in my role is to just make sure that we are getting comfortable having some hard conversations so that it doesn't feel like it's a hard thing to do. It's always going to be difficult, but we need to just kind of take these conversations as, just part of growing as an organization, and just knowing that we are not perfect, but we always need to be open to hearing how our colleagues are feeling. We can talk a lot about policy and process and, changing things. And of course, we try to do those things, but we also just want to make sure that FAR is a safe space where people feel comfortable speaking and raising concerns, and then also feel that those concerns are heard and addressed.
What's your advice to organizations that are similarly situated, either in headcount or revenue, about how to integrate equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice into their day-to-day lives in the work context? What's worked really well that you would lift up for someone else to consider?
I think what did work well, especially when we had the working group, and we still have the working group, just give everybody a chance to be involved if they want to be. We got a lot of really, really great feedback from everyone across the organization, and especially the people who really, really felt like they had something to say about their experience at FAR and how we could do better. So definitely just inviting everybody to the table is really, really important. And secondly, I think it's just like keep having those conversations. My personal feedback, I want us to stop like DEI-ing, like, every time we say, oh, well, we did this thing. Like, well, what's the result, right? Like, are we more comfortable having hard conversations? Are we moving in the right direction? Like, I don't want us to just say like, we did a thing. To me, it's really important. And again, we're still working on this. Like, can we get to the essence of like what we are trying to achieve, rather than just saying we did a thing, or saying that we are more diverse, or saying that we, have this policy. It's just an ongoing conversation. And are we getting more comfortable having those conversations so that we know that we didn't just fix everything,
Right.
because
Or check a box, right? Yeah.
yeah.
At the same time, we know our diversity practices survey at Nonprofit HR tells us that many organizations are still at the beginning of their journey, and there are many others who haven't yet begun, or they might be focused on diversity without understanding the connection to inclusion and belonging. Getting on the journey is the first step. And in some instances, at the beginning of that journey, you're checking boxes. You're making sure that you've done some kind of performative things. And then you move beyond the performance to more meaningful steps. And we're unpacking a lot of systems and history and inequity, and it's going to take some time. So I applaud FAR for whatever steps they've taken in this direction. And just wonder overall, you talked about your connection to Nonprofit HR, and that the organization, our firm, is helping you and your team work through some performance management design issues and other kinds of competency modeling. And what was the catalyst for reaching out beyond the walls of your organization to get support?
I think FAR reached out to Nonprofit HR in 2020, and we had been growing. I had mentioned we started as a smaller organization. We're not so many years old. We're still less than a decade. We had maybe half the employees that we had when we started. And so as we grew, we still had people internally that were focusing on HR functions, but we really just recognized. And I think this even came from our staff, like, hey, could we formalize this a little bit more, this HR function? And so we wanted to reach out for that expertise. That was when we reached out to nonprofit HR. I know we did a search, and I think nonprofit HR like really met a lot of our criteria in terms of the expertise that you bring, especially, your experience with organizations like ours. Being an organization that was moving really, really quickly, we needed to make a lot of grants really quickly. We needed to bring a lot of diverse stakeholders to the table in the work that we do. So just knowing that we had a partner that we could rely on for that HR function, so that our staff also, have the support that they need, was really, really important. In some ways, I think we also wanted an outside partner to tell us what we don't know, right? Like, what are we missing? We think we have a lot of things going for us that are right, but what are the gaps, right? And what do we need to anticipate as we continue growing? Because, even in terms of headcount, we're still a small organization, but we're much bigger than we were. So, as we grow, what are the things that we need to have in place to support our staff and to make sure, like I said, that we're continuing to attract and retain and develop the talent that we really want to have. So we need to bring in professionals.
Fair enough. As you've navigated that growth over the last couple of years, what would you say has been kind of the greatest HR or talent management accomplishment or win for FAR? What single-handedly leaps above the others in terms of victories or wins for the organization?
Last year, we updated our parental leave policy, and we had been getting feedback from our staff for quite some time. As a small organization of under 50 people, we didn't have too many people taking parental leave, but we know it's really, really important. Being a DC-based organization, many of our staff who live in the district would have access to local kind of like benefits, local paid benefits. But, as a distributed workforce, not all of our staff would have that, depending on where they live. What we really did is as we're a science-based organization. So first we wanted to start from like, what does the science say? How can that inform our parental leave policy? And we know that the science really supports that if there are two parents, having both of them there has a benefit to the child. That kind of said to us, give parental leave equitably, regardless of where they live and regardless of whether they're, the birthing parent, the non-birthing parent, it shouldn't matter. We also knew that, we wanted to provide full pay, because we also know that the stress of loss of pay during parental leave for people who are working is really, really challenging. So we totally revamped our policy in terms of what we offer our staff for both birthing and non-birthing parents. We offer 12 weeks of fully paid parental leave. And so that's, of course, for the birth, adoption, or placement of a child. And again, for either parent. And then for those who are the birthing parent, we know that, of course, that period that it takes to recover just medically, just physically. We offer an additional 6 weeks for the birthing parent. And then, one other thing that, we know from the science is that not every pregnancy ends in birth. We wanted to take account of that. And so we also have a pregnancy loss policy to acknowledge that loss that, that someone may experience. And so it's sort of an addition to bereavement policy. And we think that's also really, really important because it's not just parental leave that is important. It's also, kind of the journey that might involve loss. And so we wanted to acknowledge it as well. So in terms of my perspective, I think that was a big win. We got a lot of feedback from our staff that really speaks to, kind of the work-life balance that FAR says is important. That adds to the longevity of their career at FAR, right? They feel like, okay, now I know that I have this policy to rely on. Should I want to become a parent? Should I be able to become a parent? And that it's not going to negatively affect my plans for building a family. So I think that's been a big win for us, and just in terms of living what we believe in and expanding what we offer to our employees.
So important to align what you do from a talent perspective with your mission, your purpose. When those two things are out of alignment, it speaks volumes. And so I applaud you and the FAR leadership for making those decisions. Jonna, with the time we have remaining, I would love to have you just imagine FAR's future from a talent perspective when it kind of reaches its peak performance. What's happening from a talent perspective in your organization? What does that look like? What does it feel like? Help us imagine what the future of work looks like for FAR.
I think in terms of, what we want to see a lot of just clarity on the part of everybody who works for FAR, right? So we want everybody to know exactly what's expected of them, how they are evaluated, and to be really, really comfortable in terms of giving and receiving that feedback. I think we're getting there. But I think the reason that I say that's important is because that fits right into, how people will grow with the organization. So longer term, we want our employees to be making a career with us. We want to, continue to be attracting people who are at the top of their fields. And we know that, in order to do that, we're going to need to compete in this talent marketplace by offering, great benefits and support to our staff. And, we want to, just continue helping our employees to work and achieve our mission. And so, I think just in terms of the future of talent, we want to continue to have a great staff, and we have a fantastic staff. And we know that, we'll add new members and continue growing with them.
We thank you for your insights today, for sharing a little bit of the FAR world with us and with our listeners, and really applaud you for the steps you've taken to move in the right direction. It's certainly Nonprofit HR's honor to support your mission and to support the talent at FAR. And we certainly wish you all the best. Thank you for your time today. I enjoyed the conversation and look forward to continuing the journey with you and the leadership of FAR.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure to work with the Nonprofit HR team, and we've really, really enjoyed getting to work with your team. So thank you.
Well, that's a wrap on another episode of The Switch. Thank you to Lisa Brown Alexander, CEO for Nonprofit HR, and Jonna Davis, Operations and Impact Director for the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. To learn more about FAR's mission and the work they are doing, visit FAR online at FFAR.org. To hear more episodes of The Switch and learn more about Nonprofit HR, visit us online at nonprofithr.com/The Switch.